In conversation with Dan Flanigan. Dan Flanigan is a lawyer and award-winning author. He has published a poetry collection, Tenebrae, a memoir of love and death, a collection of short fiction, Dewdrops, and four private detective novels in his Peter O'Keefe series, Minkai, The Big Tight, On Lonesome Road, and An American Tragedy. The Keith O saga began in 1986. The tarnished art of the great is good decade. The series concept is to follow O'Keefe and the diverse cast of characters in O'Keefe's orbit as their fictional life intersect with some of the scam scheme and scandals of the last 4 decades of American life, such as the death throes of the traditional mafia and the L scandal that rocked the financial crime in the 1980s, 1990s. His latest book, published June 25, 2024, focuses on the harrowing witch hunt, hysteria, the satanic panic, and related moral panic of the 80s and 90s that sent a number of innocent child care professionals to prison. Began his legal career as a professor, then served the civil rights cause for several years, and has been a finance lawyer in private practice for many years. Dan and his wife Candy created Syria Toxin, a prominent alcohol and drug addiction treatment center in Arizona, and he served on the board of World Childhood Foundation, United States of America, dedicated to ending child sexual abuse and exploitation. You can learn more about Dan and his books at www.danflaniganbooks.com, and his legal bio can be found at www.plosignelli.com. And on today's episode of Photo Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today, Dan Flanigan. How are you doing, Dan?
Better than I deserve.
Oh, that's lovely actually to have you on the show today. Quite amazing. We're going to be having a lovely conversation around the beautiful titles. Thanks for coming on.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So, Dan, I want to first say that I am impressed reading through the description page of your thriller novel, Mink Eyes, which is the first book in the Peter O'Keefe series. I'd like to ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write Mink Eyes?
I had written and published a book of poetry, Tenebrae, and a book of short fiction, Dewdrops, and had always thought of myself as, let's say, a literary writer, and uh, never thought about detective crime fiction. I mean, not that I didn't read it, but
Yeah.
never thought of writing it. And I came to wanting to write a story that somewhat reflected what's happening in my own life about fall, redemption, struggling with addiction, that sort of thing. And I thought, it'd be nice to make this more interesting than just gazing on my part. And I said, I'm going to put this in a detective crime format. And I happened to have been involved in a case as a young lawyer that involved a mink farm uh, uh, down in the lake country near where I live. And it was a Ponzi scheme kind of thing, and a scam really. Although I'm not sure that the guy who ran it intended it to be a scam. It just was because it
Wow.
just fake. So I just and then my I just let my imagination take off from there,
Mm.
and made it way more. I guarantee you, anybody who reads it, that wasn't my case in terms of all the excitement, sex, and violence, and all that.
Wow.
But but that's what triggered it.
Oh, wow. Wow, that sounds like an amazing introduction into a novel. Thank you so much for sharing. I do love enjoying you talk about the making of Make Eyes. If you have a copy of the book there, I'd love you to show it to the camera just so we see what it looks like.
I don't have mink eyes, but I have the next one in the
The big
series,
tie,
the big tilt.
tilt.
Uh,
Just
yeah, right.
yeah. Yeah, good. You initially published a book of poetry and a book of short fiction. What led you into the crime genre? How did you develop the idea of the series? Is there an overall plan for it? Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, as I said, what led me into the first book, Mink Eyes, was to just try to do something in quotes literary, but in a more interesting format, and then at some later point,
Mm,
I thought, it'd be interesting. The book is set in 1986,
yeah.
and and it'd be interesting to take O'Keefe and this group of characters and others that in it come into his orbit over time and take them through sort of the history of our times, at least as far as I can go before senility or death stops me. Uh,
Mm,
and and so that's the plan of the series, which
mm,
is to um, theoretically get right up to the present day with these people,
mm.
and
Oh, wow.
for for example, uh, I'm now on the fourth book. I haven't made it past 1988 in four
Wow.
books, but uh, moving on that way. It's just that the 80s was so interesting and event filled and scandalous that it's kind of hard to get out of it.
Mm. Love your take on that. Love your description on that. And how you get in touch with crime genre, how you develop the idea of the series and the overall plan. That's quite lovely to know. Thanks for sharing.
It's been very helpful. It's provided both an anchor
Mm,
and a compass. So it's something that grounds me in a reality, and and then a way to go.
yeah.
Really, I'm glad I stumbled onto it. The crime fiction is in some ways a trap in the sense of people want to paint you in that box, and you're not a real
Mm,
literary writer or whatever, but but
yeah.
I don't agree with that. And I recall that the first mystery detective novel was Oedipus Rex. It wasn't a novel, but a play. That Dickens often wrote crime fiction. That
Wow.
Brothers Karamazov was a
Wow.
was a courtroom thriller. So it's this genre stuff is can be a can be a trap. I'm with it and I'm sticking with it. So
Wow, that's quite fun to know. Thank you so much, Dan, for sharing. Thank you. And also, I see that you already have four books so far in the series, from Mink Eyes, which is the first, to The Big Teeth, and On Lonesome Road to An American Tragedy, making a total of four so far. I am curious to ask, how far are you taking us in this series? Are there still more to come, or is that all we'll be experiencing?
um, as I said, I'm going to get as far into our times and up to chronologically as I
Mm,
can. Uh, and for example,
yeah.
now that I'm working on the next book, and the
Wow.
next book is about the rise of white supremacist Christian identity, anti-government, neo-Nazi hate groups,
Wow.
uh, survivalists, etc., in the 80s and early 90s. The whole witch's brew that ultimately led to the Oklahoma City bomb. Uh,
Mm,
that was such a terrible tragedy in the U.S.
mm.
So that's and that that book is set more or less in 1991, 1992. So I'm slowly moving along chronologically that way, and
Oh
intend to
wow.
keep.
Oh wow. I love your take on that actually. And I'm hoping that that goes on successfully once you get it on. Well done. That sounds like we've got a lot ongoing. And also, what have been the major theme you have already dealt with in the series? And have you considered any that you might explore in future installments?
The first three books deal, I guess, the main theme in those is really the demise of the traditional mafia, criminal mafia in the United States.
Mm,
Uh, and the way it works, O'Keefe gets in trouble with them in the first book, Mink Eyes, and
yeah.
then it's working itself out in the next two books. You know,
Wow.
they are standalone, but that's they also kind of a little bit of a trilogy in that it takes that to work them out. Also, the AIDS epidemic fits strongly into one of them, the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s, the S&L financial crisis of the 80s and 90s is prominently in there. The drug addiction and the world of drug distribution and all that is part of it. In terms of broader thematic things, I think there's a lot going on, but
Mm,
basically it's about power dynamics. And,
mm,
and another thing is the rise of the surveillance society with everybody from the government to private people listening to each other,
yeah.
recording each other, taping and all that.
Yeah.
It's power dynamics, abuse of power at every level, government, law enforcement, familial, gender, and and the effect of that on the victims, if you will, of it.
Wow. That's quite amazing. And I like the fact that you've chosen to explore this particular themes in your future installment. I love the sound of it. Something that's quite very important and it's worthwhile, especially when you have to talk about it in forms of novel, forms of storytelling, convey information literature-wise. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
Love the sound of it.
thank you.
Now let's go to your fourth series. That's in the name of an American tragedy, which centers around a very dark and troubling panic in the 1980s. Unfortunately, it is quite resonant for the time we live in today, to be frankly speaking. Was that what sparked your desire as a framework for this newest novel in the series and also in the book in the series? Are you looking for that kind of resonance with your current events? I'm not sure if you understand my question.
Oh, yeah, I do. The uh, in terms of the specific satanic panic,
Mm,
and even though and the related, really, it's also more about the a related moral panic
mm,
about uh, what turned out to be, in many cases, false accusations against child caregivers of
yeah,
sexual abuse of children. Uh, and I listened to a podcast. I don't even remember what it was
yeah.
about that whole issue, and I just fell down the rabbit hole and said, I'm writing, trying to tie into the major occurrences, things that happened in our society, and
Mm,
this was a big one. I lived through it, but not. I didn't get directly involved at any point, so I felt almost like I had to write that book,
mm,
and so that was. Uh, what led me there. And I mean, when I realized that it did resonate a lot with what's going on today, I
currently.
was happy about that in the sense of Adam, and maybe people will find it more interesting in that regard. But I don't look for those things specifically. I'm really trying to look for the things that dominated lives or
Mm,
were significant in lives during that period of time. But it turns out that that there's just a lot in those times that resonates in our times, because a lot of things that have come to pass began back then. Or I was interviewed by somebody about that book and said, you know, it was a moral panic back then. And he said, he was a UK person, you know, an English person. And he said, well, don't they have a moral panic in America every 20 years or so? and,
Oh,
and you know, we had the SNL crisis back then, but then we had the 2008 crisis
oh,
here. So it's something's gonna happen cyclically.
oh, wow. That's quite lovely, very amazing, quite wholesome to know. I particularly enjoy you talking about it and to know that all of these things actually resonate with what that we are currently passing through in our current world. It's quite fun to know, really. It's quite fun to know. And also, there's this question, Dan, that I love asking authors that come on my show. I've always been fascinated, taken aback, surprised by how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentences make paragraph and paragraphs makes pages and pages makes chapters and chapters coalition come together to eventually make a great novel. And this always leaves me thinking, how exactly did they get the ideas and inspiration to put these words together in a way that a novel is formed? Now as far as writing is concerned, I'd like to ask you too, how do you get the inspirations and ideas for your book, especially with your thriller series? Where did they come from?
I lived through it for one thing, uh, and then I have a notions about things that I want to do, and also in the course of doing the background research for a particular book, I might run into something else that I've sort of forgotten about or seems more
Oh,
important than I thought it was. For example, this An American Tragedy, the recent one, where I happened to listen to a podcast and fell down the rabbit hole,
yeah.
that kind of thing. On the other hand, uh, I, uh, uh, I do have mind for the future that may or may not happen. You know, you start into it a little bit and find out that wasn't such a good idea after all. But
Yeah. Such an amazing one, really. I enjoyed you talking about it. Thank you so much for sharing. It's something I love asking other authors, and some would say, I got inspirations from real life experiences. I got inspiration from stories of friends. I got inspiration from what I've seen around me. I got my inspirations and ideas from, hilariously, the dreams that I have when I go to sleep. And sometimes when I it drops on conversation that are not meant for me. And
mm,
that's the most hilarious to be really. Yeah, so there are
mm.
different ways where authors get inspirations from. It's always fun to hear them talk about it. Thanks for sharing.
I work those kind of things in, but to the main narrative. You know, it's I'll run into something a scene I'm trying to write and say, you know, I
Mm,
remember this, and I'll work that into it, that kind of thing. But usually
mm,
I'm trying to tie into a larger kind of cultural or political or social
see.
narrative of some kind.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Now, Dan, aside from being a novelist, you're also a poet, and you have a collection titled Tenebrae, a memoir of love and death. First, I'd love you to tell us a bit about this collection without giving spoilers, and also, as someone who has explored different genres, which one do you find easy or fun to write over another?
At Tenebrae, my wife died in 2011, and
Oh,
I and I had put off writing long before that.
oh,
So, you know, put it on the never going to come back to it burner
mm,
kind of thing. And I wanted to do something in honor of her. It's one of the we were married together for 40 some years, and um, you know, I tell people now, make sure that if anybody's going to die before you are, you're really nice to them because you're going to feel guilty about everything you could have done that you didn't do. But,
Absolutely.
but I
Wow.
wanted to do something more or less in honor of her, although it's very realistic. So the Tenebrae part focuses on her last illness and death. The Tenebrae itself, I'm not practicing religious anymore, but grew up very much a Catholic in the old days of the old Latin Mass and lots of ritual and Gregorian chant and all that. And during Holy Week, and it still is in a lot of Christian churches, a ceremony called Tenebrae. Tenebrae in Latin means darkness, and it is uh, a series. It starts out with 15 candles and candelabras on the altar,
Mm,
and each one of those 15 candles is extinguished one at a time. And between those, there are prayers and psalms and that sort of thing, and readings until ultimately the church is in utter darkness. And it's to symbolize Christ on the cross and his death. So that suggested to me a, a very interesting way to organize this thing. So Tenebrae itself, there's a few other poems in the book,
yeah.
is 15 poems, and there's a little candle icon on each one, and there are 15 of them, and they and it's sort of the progress, somewhat of our relationship, but mainly once we got the bad news and leading to the end, if you will.
Wow. Very, that is very pulling to listen to. First of all, I'm sorry to hear about the death of your wife, yeah. And I agree with you. You're saying that, whenever you have someone close who dies, you would feel guilty of the things you ought to have done that you did not do. There exists guilty that will watch you like, oh, I wish I did this when he was alive. I wish I did this when he was around. I wish I did this, and did that. So there's this feeling of guilt that wash over, whenever you think about uh, things you should have done. So it's very emotional to say, to listen to, and yeah, it's quite a lot, really. Thanks for sharing.
And in terms of what I like, what what types of literature I like to write the most is
Mm.
actually one that I'm not doing currently, and that is stage plays. Uh,
Oh,
when I began, I had a period in the 1980s when I wrote a lot of things, and I wrote three plays at that time, and one of them
yeah.
uh, really quickly got a stage reading in New York,
Wow.
and I thought, this is going to be it. But with plays, especially with serious dramatic plays, it's
Mm.
really hard to take those anywhere. Uh,
Oh,
even even have significant number of performances.
yeah.
Uh, so I just really didn't pursue that very much. I took one of the plays, a play called Dewdrops,
Oh,
that I turned it into a novella that was primarily dialogue, but a novella,
oh,
and put it in this Dewdrops collection of short fiction. But
wow.
still, I still believe that I'm better at that than anything, and generally just better at dialogue than anything.
Oh. That's quite amazing to know, really. Thank you so much for sharing. I enjoy you talking about that. Now, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing these books and also ever since you've got published? And also, I'd like to ask you too, Dan. How do you handle criticism as a writer?
The the in terms of criticism, first of all, I have my daughter helps me with everything book related, and I have her look at the reviews first and sort of vet them. I'm willing to listen to a negative one as long as it's not just some stupid negative one, if you understand what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
I've benefited from some call them negative, but constructive uh, critical comments over time,
Yeah.
and actually listen to them. But so on the one hand, I'm somewhat thin-skinned. I know how to dish it out, but it's hard to take it. And but I'm able to get there eventually
Mm.
and really look at it. So
Yeah.
there seems like there's nothing but challenges, starting with the blank page every day.
Yeah.
And so that,
That's
yeah,
the
so,
making.
and it's of course a great feeling to finish a book.
Yeah.
And then you've got to, get it published and market it. And so there's a lot of challenges along the way, and nothing happens
Mm.
magically. You've got to work at every bit of it. But it's very satisfying to me, I wanted to do it my whole life from the time I was a sophomore in high school. And I punished myself a lot, and probably my suffering wife too, because I supposedly sold out and didn't do what I was really supposed to do, and so on.
Oh.
But now, as things have turned out, I shouldn't have done all that, because I'm very happy doing it now when I can afford it, and I've lived a life that I can actually write about some of the things that happened in it, and so on. Things have worked out. That's what I mean when you asked me at first how I'm doing. Better than I deserve, no doubt
Mm.
about it.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's quite amazing to know, really. Thank you so much for your answers. I really enjoyed listening to it and having you talk about it. It's quite fun to know. Thanks a million. Yeah, thank you. And before we call it a day today, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your books that we did not mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know? Is there anything?
First, you read off the website, but I have a website, danflaniganbooks.com, that has a lot on there. And not that I'm uh, uh, pushing Amazon necessarily, but the Amazon author page and the related book pages really have a lot on there and
Oh,
really describe the whole thing.
okay.
Also, they're available in every format, including in the case of the detective books, audio books.
Oh,
So the first three are done and out, and then the fourth one's in the process. American Tragedies, it's in the process of production right now. So it's and then I do a newsletter occasionally. It's not
oh.
very regular, but that can be signed up for on the website and so on.
That's interesting. Thank you so much for letting us know. Thank you. And as a published author too, I'd like to ask you, what sort of advice do you offer other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category?
I guess I really hesitate because everybody's so unique and in different situations. But I guess I'll say, if you were meant enough to do it, you will likely ultimately do it. And you should
Mm,
cooperate with that by actually trying to do it.
good.
So
Wow.
that's it. Despite all kinds of things intervening, including at one point just saying, I'm not gonna suffer this way anymore. I'm
Mm,
It about right. Yeah, here I am. Yeah, so and I'm very happy the way it turned out. But
mm,
I'm also glad though that the kind of person I was at age 20, say, or age 25 or 30. Sitting down trying to be a real writer at that point would have been disaster.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so at least in my situation, uh, it was better to wait,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
Oh, wow. That's actually very amazing. I mean, I enjoy you talking about that. I enjoy listening to your advice. And I'm hoping that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. And now, just in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
Yeah, like I said, it's you can order them in the bookstore. You can all the Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, all those things, and in both ebook format and in print book format. You can even get of the detective books. You can get a hardback if you want it, and then the the three first three detective books are in audiobook format. The
Mm,
fourth, the newest one, is in production, and I'm having some fun because I'm taking the short fiction book,
yeah.
Dewdrops, and doing an audio book of it also, and that'll be coming out soon.
Oh,
Pretty much any way you want to do it. I haven't done the poetry book yet, but I probably will ultimately as an
interesting.
audio book. I mean,
Oh, that's amazing, actually. Thank you for sharing. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Dan Flanigan books directly on Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles, other platform on his website. I also left a link to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Dan, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say it's more than awesome, actually having this lovely conversation around your beautiful titles. Thanks for coming on. This was great.
thank you for having me. Great,
Yeah, it's my
great.
pleasure as well.